far out at the edge of the known world, where land loosens its grip and gives way to open water. There is a place where time does not hurry, where moments stretch gently, and silence feels wide and patient. Tonight, you don't need to picture this place clearly, only to sense it, as though remembering something distant, something half forgotten and deeply calm, an island, surrounded by dark, steady sea, beneath a vast northern sky. You are safe here, listening quietly, with nothing required of you. The story will unfold slowly, without urgency, without tension. If your thoughts drift, that is exactly as they should. Off the western coast of Scotland, far beyond the last familiar villages and harbours, beyond places where people settle and stay, lies a small, isolated group of islands known as the Flannan Isles. They rise abruptly from the Atlantic, dark stone emerging from endless water, their edges worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. From a distance, they appear almost still, unchanging, as though they have always been there, and always will be. For much of history, these islands were rarely visited, not because they were forbidden, and not because they were feared, but because there was nothing there that invited comfort. No fresh water, no trees, no shelter from storms, only rock, wind, and the steady voice of the sea. Sailors knew of the islands, though few could name them with certainty. They were known more by instinct than by chart. A place to keep one's distance, a place to pass quietly. The waters surrounding the Flannan Isles were unpredictable, capable of calm stillness one moment and overwhelming force the next. Waves arrived without warning, rolling in from far beyond the horizon, carrying the full weight of the open ocean behind them. Even experienced crews treated this stretch of sea with respect, adjusting their routes, watching the skies, listening carefully to the wind. By the late 19th century, the world beyond these islands had grown busier. Shipping routes expanded, trade increased, and vessels crossed narrow passages in poor weather, often at night. Navigation became more important than ever. A lighthouse was needed, not for beauty, but for survival. And so the decision was made to build a lighthouse on Island Moor, the largest of the Flannan Isles. Construction began in the late 1890s, slowly, deliberately. Stone was hauled upward by hand, walls raised piece by piece, each one placed with care. There was no rush, only endurance. The lighthouse was not ornate, not decorative. It was designed to last. A tall white tower, attached to modest living quarters, built to withstand relentless wind and salt. When the light was first illuminated in 1899, it brought reassurance to those at sea, a steady glow, turning methodically, cutting through darkness and mist. From miles away, ships could see it and know where they were. But the lighthouse was never meant to stand alone. It required attention, daily care, constant vigilance, and so men were assigned to live there, for weeks at a time, sometimes longer. Life as a lighthouse keeper was quiet, structured, predictable. Days followed strict routines, and nights were measured by the turning of the lamp. There were inspections, cleaning, checking gears and lenses. Meals were taken at regular hours, logs written carefully, weather observed and recorded in neat handwriting. Order mattered here because isolation demanded it. 3 men were stationed at the lighthouse at any given time. They lived together, worked together, not necessarily as close friends, but as professionals. Each relied on the others. Each understood the responsibility they shared. In December of 1900, 3 such men were on duty at the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. James Ducat, the principal keeper, experienced, steady, deeply reliable. Thomas Marshall, the second assistant, methodical, observant, careful in his duties. And Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper, physically strong, capable, accustomed to harsh conditions. They were familiar with one another and with the rhythm of the island. Winter settled heavily over the Flannan Isles that year. Days shortened, nights lengthened. The sun lingered only briefly, and darkness arrived early. The wind rarely rested, moving constantly across the island, whistling around stone walls and rattling windows. Storms passed through regularly, some fierce and sudden, others lingering for days. From the mainland, the lighthouse light remained visible, a small comfort, a steady presence. Inside the lighthouse, routine continued as always. Logs were written, lamps checked, mechanisms cleaned and maintained. The men worked mostly in silence, speaking when necessary, resting when their shifts allowed. Isolation became familiar, almost comforting. There was little distraction and little expectation, only the work and the rhythm of repetition. As December wore on, the weather grew harsher. Winds strengthened, gusts striking the building with heavy force. Waves surged higher against the cliffs below, sending spray upward, sometimes reaching the windows. The lighthouse stood firm, as it had been built to do, and still. The men carried on. The final days passed quietly. The lighthouse logbook recorded heavy seas, strong winds, persistent storms. One entry mentioned prayer, an unusual note, but not a desperate one, more a reflection, written carefully and left there. On December 26th, a supply ship called the Hesperus approached the Flannan Isles. Its visit was routine, expected, a brief stop to deliver provisions. As the ship drew closer, something felt wrong. No signal was given from the lighthouse. No response returned. From a distance, the lamp appeared dark, unlit, silent, a small detail, but unsettling. When a relief keeper went ashore, the island felt strangely empty. No voices, no movement, only wind and distant waves. The climb toward the lighthouse was quiet, the storm having passed. Inside, everything appeared almost normal. Too normal. The living quarters were tidy, chairs pushed in, meals unfinished. A clock had stopped, its hands frozen. 2 waterproof coats were missing. 1 remained, and the men themselves were nowhere to be found. This is where the mystery begins to deepen, slowly, without urgency, and you don't need to follow it closely. Let the images soften. Let the details blur. The story will continue, but there is no rush. For now, rest here, at the edge of land and sea. After the discovery, the lighthouse was relit, its beam once again turning slowly across the dark water, as though nothing had happened. From a distance, it looked as it always had, steady, reliable, unchanged. But for those who knew the story, the light now carried weight, quietly, without asking for attention. News of the empty lighthouse reached the mainland slowly, as news often did in those days. There were no urgent messages, no instant explanations, only questions, carried by word of mouth, from port to port, from one winter evening to the next. An investigation began, measured, methodical. Officials visited the island, walked its paths, stood in silence inside the living quarters. They examined the lighthouse logbook, page by page, line by line. The handwriting was neat, careful, unchanging. Nothing in the entries suggested panic. Nothing hinted at sudden chaos. Only observations, weather, wind, sea, and then the entries stopped. The final days recorded spoke of storms, winds described as fierce, seas described as heavy. One entry mentioned prayer, a quiet note, written without emphasis, not fear, not alarm, just acknowledgement. To some, this meant very little. To others, it lingered. Why record prayer in a place defined by routine? The scene inside the lighthouse remained unsettling in its calm. The kitchen was orderly, chairs pushed in, utensils cleaned, beds were unmade, as though the men had risen quickly and not returned. A clock had stopped, its hands frozen at an unknown moment. Oilskins hung by the door, heavy waterproof coats used in storms. 2 were missing, 1 remained. A small detail, but one that drew attention. Outside, the evidence of the storm was unmistakable. A metal supply box, secured high above the rocks, had been torn from its position. Iron railings were bent inward, as though struck by immense force. Stones had been displaced, moved from where they had rested for years. The sea had reached places it should not have reached. It had been powerful, violent, indifferent. The most widely accepted explanation emerged quietly. The men had likely gone out together to secure equipment during the storm. A wave, larger than expected, could have swept them from the rocks The sea does not offer second chances. This explanation made sense, logically, practically, and yet, some details resisted it. Why would all three men leave the lighthouse at once, leaving the light unattended? Why would experienced keepers, trained to prioritize safety, take such a risk? Why were no remains ever found? Despite extensive searches, why did the island feel, even now, so quiet? As time passed, other ideas surfaced, not loudly, not officially, but quietly, spoken in low voices, over warm drinks, on long nights. Some suggested a disagreement, tempers strained by isolation, but there was no sign of struggle, no damage inside, no indication of violence. Others suggested illness, confusion, panic. But again, no evidence supported this. The logbook revealed order, not disorder. Then there were the older stories, the ones that predated the lighthouse. Local fishermen had long regarded the Flannan Isles with caution, not fear, but awareness. The islands were said to feel different, heavier, closer to the elements, a place where the wind seemed to carry voices, and silence felt unusually complete. These were not dramatic tales, not warnings, just observations, passed down quietly. Before the lighthouse was built, the islands were rarely visited at night. Animals were not kept there, and shelter was temporary. It was a place one passed, not a place one stayed. And yet, three men had lived there, comfortably, routinely, until one winter. As years passed, the story softened, edges smoothed by time. The disappearance became legend, then history, then quiet curiosity. New keepers were assigned, and the lighthouse continued its work. Those who served there later spoke of silence, not an uncomfortable silence, but a deep one, the kind that settles into stone and lingers. Some reported hearing footsteps when no one else was present. Others spoke of doors opening gently, only to find nothing beyond them. No harm ever came to these later keepers. And so the stories remained stories. The lighthouse itself stood unchanged, its walls weathered, its mechanisms maintained. The light turned, steady, predictable, a symbol of order against a world that rarely offered it. As the mystery lived on, it became less about explanation and more about reflection, a reminder of the balance between human effort and natural force of routine, set against unpredictability, of light standing against darkness. As you listen now, you may notice your thoughts slowing. Details matter less, and rhythm matters more. The rise and fall of the sea, the steady turning of the light. Nothing urgent, nothing demanding attention. You don't need to decide what happened. The story does not ask that of you. It simply exists, like the island itself. Solid, quiet, unchanging. As the fire beside you burns gently and the night deepens, allow the mystery to soften, To settle, it does not need to be solved. To be complete, the lighthouse keeps watch, as it always has, and you can rest. As time moved forward, the Flannan Isles lighthouse returned to its steady routine, its light once again sweeping across the sea, night after night, unchanged by what had come before. From the mainland, it appeared as it always had, a small certainty in a wide and restless world. But for those who knew the story, the light carried memory, quietly, without drawing attention to itself. The disappearance of the three keepers was no longer fresh, yet it never truly faded. It lived on in quiet spaces, in pauses between conversations, in glances cast toward the horizon, not with fear, but with thoughtfulness. Those who studied the case years later, long after the original investigation had closed, noticed something subtle. The mystery endured not because of what was known, but because of what remained ordinary. There was no chaos recorded, no frantic warning, no dramatic final act, only routine and then absence. This quiet ending unsettled people more than any dramatic one could have. The logbook entries continued to draw attention, written in careful script, consistent in tone. They spoke of storms, wind, sea, but they also spoke of order, discipline, and calm observation. Even the mention of prayer stood alone, not as a cry, but as a reflection, a moment of stillness recorded on paper. Some later readers wondered if the men sensed something approaching, not danger in a specific form, but a change in atmosphere, a pressure in the air, a weight carried by the wind. Anyone who has lived close to the sea knows this feeling, the sense that something is shifting before it becomes visible. Perhaps the men went out together, not in haste, but in shared responsibility. Perhaps one noticed something unusual and called to the others. Perhaps they moved with the confidence of experience, believing the task to be routine. The sea does not always announce its intentions. A wave can rise differently than expected, carrying more force, reaching further. It would take only a moment, a misjudged step, a sudden surge, and then silence. Yet the absence of physical evidence continued to trouble some. Searches had been conducted, the surrounding waters examined. No remains were ever found. The sea, vast and patient, kept its secrets. As the years passed, the lighthouse became a place of quiet contemplation. Those assigned there later followed the same routines, kept the same logs, maintained the same mechanisms, but many spoke of the silence. Not an empty silence, but a complete one. The kind that presses gently against thought and invites introspection. Some keepers reported small experiences, footsteps above them when no one else was present, a door opening softly, then settling again, a sense of company without presence. None of these experiences were frightening. They were simply noted and then forgotten. Life continued, as it always does. The lighthouse remained essential, its purpose unchanged. Storms came and went, ships passed safely, and the story of the three keepers became part of the place itself. Not a warning, not a threat, just history, settled into stone and wind. The Flannan Isles stood quietly, their cliffs enduring, their shapes softened only by time. Birds nested there, waves broke there, the sky passed overhead. Nothing about the islands suggested unrest, and yet their stillness felt deeper, more complete. People are often uncomfortable with unanswered questions. We seek explanations, conclusions, resolution. But some stories resist that impulse. They do not close neatly. They do not offer certainty. Instead, they invite reflection. The disappearance of the lighthouse keepers became such a story, one that asked not what happened, but what remains. What remains is the light, turning steadily. What remains is the sea, moving endlessly. What remains is the understanding that some things are larger than explanation. As you rest now, you may feel your thoughts slowing further. The details no longer need attention. The rhythm matters more than the meaning. The cadence of the voice, the imagined turning of the light. Your breathing finds its own pace, in and out. There is nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to solve. The story is no longer asking anything of you. You can allow it to soften, to blur at the edges, like mist rising from the sea, then dissolving into air. The lighthouse remains, steady and calm, and you can rest within that steadiness. The final part of the story will not seek resolution. It will simply allow everything to settle, like the tide retreating, leaving the shore quiet once more. For now, stay here, in this gentle stillness. Let the mystery fade into background thought as sleep begins to take over. As the story gently loosens its hold, there is no need to carry it forward. No need to remember details. No need to search for meaning. The lighthouse remains, not as a question, but as a presence, standing quietly, unchanged, patient. Time continues its slow movement. Whether noticed or not, the sea rises and falls. Waves reach the shore, then retreat. Again and again, never asking why, never needing explanation. The light at the top of the tower turns, not hurried, not delayed. A steady rhythm, measured, predictable, like breathing, in and out. The men who once tended the light are no longer part of the routine. And yet, their work continues. The light still turns, ships still pass safely. Purpose does not end, even when people do. There is comfort in that thought, in knowing that effort lingers, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in the background. The island itself feels settled. Stone warmed slowly by daylight, then cooled again by night. Wind passing over familiar paths, knowing exactly where to go. Nothing resists. Nothing rushes. As you listen now, your mind no longer needs to follow words closely. They can drift, like the tide, coming in, going out. Meaning softens, edges blur. If thoughts arise, let them pass. There is no need to engage, no need to hold on. They move through and dissolve. The fire nearby burns gently, steady, contained. A soft glow. Without urgency, it warms without effort and asks nothing in return. The sound of it becomes familiar, almost unnoticed. A background presence, like the lighthouse itself. Your body settles naturally. Shoulders ease, jaw softens, breathing deepens. Nothing forced, nothing controlled, just gradual release. Night stretches comfortably around you. There is no schedule here, no expectation. Sleep arrives when it chooses, at its own pace. The sea continues its endless movement, not one wave the same as the last, yet all following the same pattern. A lesson in patience and trust. The lighthouse does not question the sea, and the sea does not challenge the light. They exist together, without conflict. You can allow yourself to do the same. No struggle, no effort, just existing, here, now. As minutes pass, they lose definition. Time becomes less important, less noticeable. The night grows deeper and quieter. Words become less necessary. Silence stretches comfortably between them. You may no longer be listening actively, and that is perfectly fine. The story does not need your attention anymore. It continues on its own, like the turning light, like the flowing tide. Breath in, breath out. Slow, even natural. The room remains calm, safe, still. No changes needed, no adjustments required. If you wake briefly, the voice will still be here. If you drift, the sound will continue. Nothing is lost, nothing missed. The lighthouse keeps watch, so you don't have to. The sea moves, so you can rest. The night holds everything gently. There is no ending here, only continuation. A quiet continuation, without edges. You don't need to follow the story any further. It has already done what it needed to do. Rest now, as long as you need. There is nothing left to follow now. No story thread to hold, no detail to remember. The words no longer ask for attention. They simply exist, softly, in the background. The night continues on its own, without effort, without direction. There is no schedule here, no expectation, only stillness and warmth and quiet sound. The fire burns gently, steady and contained, not flaring, not fading, just present. A constant glow, a familiar rhythm. The sound of it becomes almost invisible, like a distant hum, like wind far away, something you notice only when you look for it, and forget again just as easily. Your breathing finds its own pace, in and out, slow, even unforced. There is nothing you need to control, nothing to correct. Thoughts may appear, softly, one at a time. They arrive without urgency and leave without effort. You do not need to follow them. You do not need to finish them. They pass and dissolve. The body begins to feel heavier, more settled, not weighed down, just supported. Muscles loosen quietly, without instruction. Shoulders soften, jaw releases, hands rest. The space around you feels stable, unchanging. Walls remain still, air remains calm. Nothing moves suddenly, nothing interrupts. Time begins to stretch and lose its edges. Minutes blend together. Seconds drift unnoticed. The night opens wider and wider. The fire crackles softly, then settles again. A gentle sound, followed by silence, a rhythm that repeats again and again. Your mind follows this rhythm naturally, not by thinking, but by resting, like floating on calm water, supported. Without effort, awareness may fade, then return briefly. That is perfectly fine. The sound remains, steady, unchanged. The voice continues whether you are listening or not. It does not require attention. It does not seek response. It simply remains, like the fire, like the night. Darkness deepens softly, not heavy, not empty, just comfortable and complete. Your body already knows how to sleep. It has done this many times before. There is nothing new to learn, nothing to remember. Breathing slows further. Each inhale calm, each exhale longer. With every breath out, something releases. The fire remains constant. No surprises, no changes, just warmth and low sound. If you wake briefly, that is fine. If you drift completely, that is fine too. Nothing is missed, nothing lost. The night holds everything gently. You are supported without needing to think about it. There is no end here, only continuation, a soft continuation, without urgency, without direction. Words begin to lose their shape. They soften, slow, and blur. Meaning fades, leaving only sound, like embers dimming slowly, without ever fully going out. The fire burns lower now, steady, reliable. A presence, not a focus. Breath in, breath out. Slow, even, nothing else matters. The body sinks further, supported, held. The mind floats gently, unconcerned. You do not need to stay awake. You do not need to listen. Sleep can come whenever it chooses. The sound will continue, The night will remain calm. Nothing will change suddenly. If thoughts appear again, they pass more easily now. They have less weight, less pull. The fire continues its quiet work, turning wood to warmth without effort, without haste. Your breathing remains steady, in, out, each breath softer than the last. The room stays still. The night stays wide. Everything feels settled. There is nothing left to do. Nothing left to decide. Nothing left to understand. Sleep arrives gently, not all at once, but gradually, like drifting deeper into water. Supported, without resistance, the words grow fewer, spaces grow longer, silence stretches comfortably. Rest now, as long as you need.